we are. Cool. That's all right. Cool. All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning into one of these streams, we're here every Monday through Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. Today we're doing a pad see ew, which is a Thai noodle dish that involves the heavy use of chow fun and dark soy sauce, which is what we're going to be using today. Probably the more common or more traditional thing to use would be the use of kecap menace, which comes from Thai cuisine. But there are many different versions of dark soy sauce that you can use. I prefer using dark soy sauce because it is what I can easily find here in Chinatown. But use whatever you can find. If you are looking for the recipe for everything that I've been cooking, those all live over on my YouTube channel, which are at youtube.com/woocancook. Lots of fun stuff living over there, including the recipe video to pretty much everything that I cook on stream, including this dish. If you are not familiar with pad see ew, it's pretty common in America at least. It comes up a lot with a lot of Thai takeout, so very commonly it sits next to pad Thai, I guess. Probably the first thing that comes up right after pad Thai is pad see ew. That or drunken noodles, both of which are super common in Thai takeout, at least here in the States. What it is essentially is a dark soy sauce based sauce that goes over a very thin chow fun rice noodle, which is substantially different from the rice noodle that you would find in things like pad Thai or actually mostly pad Thai. So it looks a little bit different, and we're going to run through some of the things that we do in order to treat chow fun a little bit differently. If you haven't yet, I also highly recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel, check out what's going on over there. In addition to all of the recipe videos that I cook, or all of the recipe videos that go along with the things that I cook, that's also where the concurrent live stream also lives. So on those concurrent live streams, you can find a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking over the next 2-3 weeks now. That all lives over on YouTube, so if you were watching over on YouTube, I know a number of folks already are watching on YouTube. You would have known a couple of weeks ago that I would be doing this pad see ew. Actually, I think the reason that I added it was because someone had requested it, so that is why we're doing pad see ew today. Alright, so if you have any questions, feel free and drop your questions in the chat, either chat. I have both chats pulled up, and I'll do my best to answer everyone. Don't know everything about pad see ew, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least fun to watch. So as with many stir fries that we do here with the Woo Can Cook series, I'm starting off with some crushed and minced garlic, about 4 cloves worth. I think I used closer to 5 or 6 because I was using up the rest of that. And followed by some finely minced ginger. So you will notice that I actually didn't really do much of a mince on my garlic. I pretty much just chopped it up after crushing it. And that's because once you give garlic a good crush, there's really no reason to fine mince it, because once it's crushed, it sort of just starts falling apart after that. So as long as you give it a good crush with the flat of your knife, you don't need to do much after that. Ginger, on the other hand, is a root veggie, which makes it a lot more sturdy, which means that we have to actually go through and do our fine mince. Lots of people ask me about microplanes, so if you are particularly averse to doing knife work, which I know lots of folks are, you can totally do this with a microplane. I just make a habit of never taking my microplane out unless I absolutely have to, because it's really annoying to plane. But yeah, if you don't want to do the knife work, you can also just grate that stuff straight through a microplane and get pretty much the same result. What I usually like doing when I'm using a microplane is grate that stuff straight into the wok, which will help preserve a lot of the flavor of the ginger. Alright, so that's our garlic and ginger. We're going to set those two things aside. And those are going to be the very first two things that go into our wok fry. Why is garlic so sticky? Yeah, I believe that would be. I believe that comes from the allicin. So the allicin of a garlic. You can find the same thing in both onions and shallots too. It's where all of the flavor comes from. You might think of it like the juice of a garlic. So when you crush a piece of garlic, you'll notice that a couple of things happen, but the main thing that happens is it starts falling apart. So what's happening when you crush it is essentially you're releasing all of that allicin, which is where all of the flavor of garlic comes from. And in that allicin, it is super, super sticky. So you'll actually notice that if you don't actually crush the garlic, that allicin, it never actually releases, which means that it isn't actually that sticky if you don't crush it. So if you've ever handled a whole piece of garlic that has not yet been crushed, you'll find that it is actually not that sticky. It only gets sticky once you crush it. The same thing is actually true for our onions and shallots too. Although I believe it is not called allicin for those two. I can't actually remember what they are called. Same principle though. Good question. Next up, I'm chopping up, these are some Thai chilies. I have gone back and forth on a number of different sources of heat for this version of pad see ew. And ultimately, I decided that the only real version of heat that really goes with this dish is a Thai chili. I have substituted pretty much every other kind of pepper that you can think of. I've definitely done it with jalapenos a lot. I have also done it with serranos. Bird's eye chilies, Fresno chilies, really any kind of chili that you can get your hands on, all of which will achieve a very similar purpose. It's essentially adding quite a little bit of subtle pepper heat. But what I've discovered is that there is really no substitute for the flavor of a Thai chili. It is a really, really unique flavor, and it is probably the quintessential flavor that you would associate with any kind of heat associated with Thai food. So if you've ever had Thai food and said, wow, that's really, really hot, it's coming from the Thai chilies. So what I have started saying is if you can't get your hands on Thai chilies, I would say just leave it out entirely. And it won't be as spicy, but it will be more accurate to what this dish is actually supposed to taste like. Yeah, oh yeah, it's sticky and the smell never goes away. That's I've heard a lot of different like tricks behind how to get the smell of garlic off of your hands. I can't remember all of them now, but I think someone said stainless steel or copper. I think rub your hands on copper, something like that, and it's just, what it's supposed to do is get the smell of garlic off your hands. I have honestly never really had a problem with my hands smelling like garlic. Maybe that's because my hands always smell like garlic. It's never really bothered me before, so I've never actually tried to have to deal with that. But what I definitely recall that someone once told me that if you rub your hands on copper, then something about the chemistry behind copper and allicin causes the stickiness and smell of garlic to come off of your skin. Interesting. Oh yeah, do I think that's a good question? Do I think the difference? Do I think using onion versus shallots is unnecessary? Unnecessary. What's the difference between an onion and a shallot? The difference is really subtle, and I have definitely substituted onions and shallots interchangeably a lot. The more that I have substituted, so I guess I could show you the difference. So the difference, I guess, like physically, the difference is very obvious. This is a red onion or a purple onion, however you want to look at it, and this is a shallot, both of which are very, very similar in flavor. They behave very, very similarly. in a stir fry or even really raw, they behave very similarly. Once you cut it open, it looks pretty much the same. You could even think of it as like a shallot is essentially a miniature onion. So I have definitely on many occasions when I have forgotten to buy shallots, have totally used a purple onion or a red onion as a substitute for a shallot, and it works just fine. But the more that I have substituted it, the more that I have discovered that the difference is pretty clear. And it's what I notice is that the difference is basically that a shallot is a lot more like punchy in flavor. So if you fine mince a shallot, it punches through a lot more than a quarter of a purple onion does. So what I very often do if I don't have shallot is I'll chop up a quarter of a purple onion, and you get essentially the same thing, but it won't punch through quite as much. So the like concentrated nature of a shallot is really what you're getting out of it. That's really what the big difference is that it's a lot more concentrated, which makes it cut through a lot more. So with a shallot, you can dice it really, really finely, and you can treat it as an aromatic element. So very often when I'm working with shallots, I'll throw it in with the garlic and ginger into a wok. Today we're not actually using either shallot or onion, because it just isn't in a pad see ew. But what I like doing when I am working with a shallot is that I love throwing that stuff in with the aromatics, so it goes in super, super early. And then what happens is it gives a lot more aromatic flavor, and it's like a lot more punchy since you're adding it super, super early. And I've noticed that you can't really do that as well. You can still do it with a piece of, or a quarter of a purple onion, but it doesn't quite work as well. That shuts off. Huh. TIL. If you're watching over on YouTube, you may notice that we have a brand new camera, so it looks real nice. It also has an auto shut-off, which I just discovered, so if you've been watching and you just noticed that the camera just turned off, that's what happened. But we have this cool new camera, and it goes like this. Ooh. It's so much information. So if you're watching over on YouTube and you notice that the camera turns off, please just let me know, because this is my first time working with this camera. All right, so this is quite a bit of broccoli. I'm not actually going to chop all of it up. Lots of questions. Yeah, same with chives and scallions. Very similar. I do a similar thing with chives and scallions. I'll chop up the whites, and then I'll throw those whites in as aromatics. So I'll throw them in really, really early with the garlic and ginger, and then we'll reserve the greens for garnish. Same thing, same concept is that those whites, they're really, really punchy, which makes it usable as an aromatic element. Whereas if you were doing it with a chive, those whites are not. Sometimes in a chive you can't even get any whites out of it, so they're not quite as punchy. But otherwise, very, very similar. Oh yeah, yeah, cool. Totally, yeah. So we are also live streaming over on YouTube, and we have a nicer camera. So we have a DSLR camera. That would be that. So it looks better, and I've been told that it plays better over on desktop too. So that reminds me, I should keep introducing myself. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we are doing a pad see ew, which is a Thai noodle dish that relies very, very heavily on the use of dark soy sauce. If you've never heard of dark soy sauce, you may have heard another version that comes up in Thai food a lot called kecap manis, which is pretty similar. I think it's a little bit different. It's definitely a different ingredient, but as far as I can tell, they're pretty interchangeable. If you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about pad see ew, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative. At the very least, fun to watch. This version of pad see ew, in addition to pretty much everything that I cook on stream, it has a recipe video that goes along with it. That would be the YouTube link at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on Reddit, which is youtube.com/woocancook. Lots of fun stuff going on over there, including the recipe video for this particular pad see ew. In those recipe videos, I usually move a little bit slower, and we kind of talk our way through some of the things that go behind, some of the decision making that goes behind how I approach a recipe, kind of talk my way through why I do certain things in a recipe, why I don't do some other things, stuff like that. So they tend to be pretty helpful to folks who are trying to follow my recipes, I guess. So, this particular version of pad see ew, it's based off of it's part of a series that we've been doing, recreating a lot of foods from restaurants here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So this one is from restaurant in Oakland called Nicha Thai. What is so significant, or at least what stands out to me most about this version, is that we're using regular American, like regular, I don't think it's actually American, but regular broccoli as opposed to gailan, which is Chinese broccoli. You will find that comes up a lot in American Thai food because it's like Americanized Thai food, which is actually what I love about it, because mostly because I really don't like gailan. I have a strong distaste for gailan, mostly because I used to eat that stuff when I was a kid, like all the time. And it was one of those veggies where when I was a kid I used to like choke that stuff down because my mom was like forcing me to eat it. So I have this strong distaste for gailan now. So yes, what was I doing? Oh, yeah. So if you haven't yet, definitely hop over to the YouTube, check out what's going on over there. In addition to all of those recipe videos, that's also where the concurrent live stream lives. I know that someone just asked about that live stream, so we have a nicer camera, so you'll notice that there's a GoPro behind me, and this fancy new Canon T6, which is super fun and cool. There's a fancy new Canon T6, which looks better apparently, has a fancier zoom. It definitely looks a lot clearer, at least as far as I can tell. So if you're interested in some of that stuff, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube, check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun new content popping up over there. So. Optics, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm super stoked for this new camera. I don't know if you've been tuning in over on YouTube all the time, you'll notice that the cutting board camera has always been super blurry because it's from an iPhone that wasn't really working super well. So I'm stoked that I finally replaced that camera because it was not looking hot. Hello, Charlie, by the way. Good to see you. Cool. You see the YouTube channel, yeah. San Francisco, yeah, totally, yeah. So if you, that reminds me, sorry, I've been like tangenting a lot. If you happen to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I highly recommend checking out that series. There's lots of fun recipes that are hacking restaurants that are local to the Bay Area. So if you happen to live in the area, there's lots of fun hacks that are paying a lot of homage to a lot of the restaurants in the area. Nicha Thai, it just so happens that I used to live across the street from Nicha Thai many years ago. So I used to order a lot of like takeout from there a lot. So cool. So next up, what we're doing, I'm whisking up. This is just 2 eggs. We don't have to whisk a whole lot of air into them. Nothing super fancy. What's going to happen is we're going to set these eggs aside, and they're going to be the very last thing that we add to our wok fry. And that is because this happens a lot in a lot of Thai food. What we're essentially doing is we're going to add those eggs really late so that they have an opportunity to coat our noodles. So that's like the quality of noodles that you would associate with a lot of Thai food, which is essentially a rice noodle that's coated in egg. So it looks, at least how I look at it, is the polar opposite to how fried rice looks, in which we add those eggs super late. Or super early, excuse me, so that when they hit the wok, they have an opportunity to fry into curdles, and you get like nice curdles of scrambled egg. In a pad see ew, we're going for the exact opposite thing. So we're going to add them super late, and instead of getting curdles of egg, what we're going to get is a rice noodle that's coated in egg. So it looks very different from how it would look if it was a fried rice. Cool. I wish he was more serious. Binging with Samish, that's a great username. How's it going? Am I related to Yan Can Cook? No. Yan Can Cook was the namesake for this channel, though. That was what I was referring to when I made this channel. I was not really taking it that seriously when I originally made the channel, and then suddenly it got super popular, and now I don't know what to do about it. Alright, so next up, I'm doing the sauce for my pad see ew. You will notice that most of the things that I'm adding to the sauce are very dark, and that is because pretty much everything that we're adding is going to be working towards an effort to develop the dark quality of our sauces. So that signature dark brown color of a pad see ew, it all comes from a number of things that go into the sauce. The number one thing that I think about is the use of dark soy sauce. But there are a number of things that we're going to do to sort of drive us towards that goal. The first thing that I just added was some dark soy from regular soy sauce, and then the second thing that I think helps quite a bit too is the use of black vinegar. So we're going to use two things actually that I think help quite a bit: are black vinegar and dark soy sauce. Both of which not only do they drive us towards that goal of like color, but it also helps us build a little bit of sweetness in our pad see ew. So that level of sweetness that we get from normally what you would find in like a lot of Chinese American food, you get that from sugar. Today we're deriving that from a number of different sauces. So that's coming from our black soy sauce, has a little bit of malted sweetness. So this dark soy sauce also has a little bit of like molasses sweetness to it. And then next up is some fish sauce. Fish sauce is more of a fermented sweetness, as the name implies. Comes from the fermentation of fish. It is also super, super sweet and super concentrated, so use that stuff really sparingly. I normally don't advocate for using more than a tablespoon or two of it in any single stir fry. You will notice that I actually just used 4 tablespoons of it though, and that's because I think it's actually a really, really important quality to this pad see ew. So I like using quite a bit of it. To my left, I think your left too, in this direction is my sink over here. So I'm throwing all of the cracked eggs over here, and then we're whisking them up, and it looks like this. That aside. Yeah, hold to the moon. Yeah. We're holding them until the very, very end. We're going to put them into our wok at the very, very end, and it's going to coat our egg noodle, or coat our noodles in egg. And that's how you get the quality of noodle that you associate with Thai food, which is egg-coated rice noodles. Next up, that's 2 tablespoons of sambal olek. And finally, 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. Oyster sauce, I normally would not use oyster sauce and fish sauce in the same dish because you get very similar qualities from it. But I actually think that those flavors that we're getting, that fishy umami that comes from it, is really, really important. And I love using both. If you are particularly averse to fishy qualities, I would say hold off on either the fish sauce or the oyster sauce, probably the fish sauce. But I also think that that fishy quality, it's really, really quintessential to the flavor of Thai food. So I'm never really that hesitant about being heavy-handed with fish sauce in Thai food. So that is our sauce, and we're going to set that aside for our wok fry. Not doing cornstarch. Cool. All right. Next up, at the very last, actually, this is the last thing that we're going to chop up before we start cooking, is our chicken. So, if you don't have chicken, you can do a pad see ew with really any kind of protein that you can get your hands on. I have done it with chicken breast all the time. I love doing it with chicken thigh because it has a little bit more fat. I've also done it with pork. That's super, super common. Pretty much any kind of protein that you have will work. I've done it with tofu all the time if you are cooking for vegetarians. Any of those things will work. I think that the use of chicken or chicken thigh in particular, is probably the most common or most traditional form of protein to add. What's most important about our chicken breast, though, is that we cut it in a very specific way. That's because that's the style of chicken that is most commonly associated with a pad see ew, and that is in a very thin strip. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting my chicken into long, thin strips, and that's going to give us the type of cook that we're looking for, is a flash cook. If your chicken is not cut thin enough, then it won't flash cook properly, and you're going to end up with either undercooked or overcooked chicken, which is never good. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Thank you. So I'm cutting these into about 1/2-inch strips, cut very, very thinly. And what's going to happen is we're going to throw this into our wok fry and let it flash cook for about 2 to 3 minutes. So in order for it to flash cook properly, though, we do need it to be in pretty thin strips. Otherwise, it will take a long time to cook. Cool. Yeah. So, let's see. And then once we're finished with this chicken, it's also sticking together. I need to sand down my cutting board again. If you notice that your chicken or anything that you're cutting, especially really thin stuff, is not cutting all the way through, that probably means that there's an uneven surface on your cutting board, which happens to me a lot when the cutting board starts warping, which is why. You'll notice that the stuff that I just sliced, it didn't cut all the way through, and that's because the location on my cutting board that I'm cutting on is not even. So on my to-do list is refinishing my cutting board. Alright, so that's our chicken. We're going to do a really simple marinade for our chicken. Well, I guess it's kind of complicated. Nothing super complicated though. But before we do that, I'm going to clean up my cutting board because there's chicken fat all over the place. Alright. Cool. Yeah. Alright, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching this stream, we're streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, with new recipe videos that pop up over on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com every Friday. Sorry, youtube.com/woocancook. If you have never seen those recipe videos or you've never been over to the YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. There's lots of fun new content that pop up over there, including the recipe video for pretty much everything that I cook on stream. Most of the time when I'm live streaming, essentially what I'm doing is cooking my way through something that I have already published a recipe video for. This particular pad see ew is a recipe that I had published back in December, I want to say. And that's over on my YouTube channel. In that recipe video, we move a little bit slower and we kind of talk my way through some of the decision making that goes behind the things that I do in a recipe. There are a couple of series that live over on that YouTube channel. Probably the one that is most popular is the Chinese American Food Hacks series. Some of the stuff that we've been doing, a lot of times what I like doing is hacking my way through some of the Chinese American classics. So a lot of things that I hack in that series are like Panda Express things, P.F. Chang's things, stuff like that. Essentially Chinese food that is really, really Americanized, and kind of deconstructing what are the American qualities about those Chinese American classics, and then seeing what it looks like if we were to remove all of those American qualities and then replace them with like traditional Chinese food, Chinese ingredients. So super often what I find myself doing in that series is essentially pulling out a lot of sugar and sauce and then replacing it with sweet or sweet adjacent flavors from Chinese cuisine. So a lot of times what I find, actually that happens all the time, is I'll pull out a lot of honey and then I'll find myself replacing it with things like sweet chili sauce or like black vinegar, dark soy sauce, both of which we use today. So what we get out of that a lot of times are like a lot of really interesting like Chinese-esque things that have like a lot of interesting flavors and ingredients that are definitely not what the original thing was originally. So super often when we work with stuff like General Tso's chicken or honey sesame chicken, stuff like that, because most of those dishes, they're not really Chinese anymore. They're pretty much just American food. So always very interesting to do. So if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel yet, I recommend checking that out. That's if you're watching on Reddit, youtube.com/woocancook. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the YouTube channel that you're already on. You made it. As you might have guessed, it is also where I do the concurrent live stream. So if you're watching on Reddit, actually if you're watching on either channel, you know there's a laptop behind me. That would be the YouTube channel live stream. So, if you haven't yet, I highly recommend hopping over, checking out what's going on over there. Lots of fun new content popping up, including the recipe for this exact live stream. All right. So, for our marinade, I'm adding a few things. That was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, and next was a star anise pod. Star anise works really, really well in marinades. It works even better if you let it go for longer. We're probably not going to marinate this for as long as it needs to really get all of that flavor out. But if you let a star anise pod go for an hour or two, it pulls out quite a bit of flavor. And you get a lot of like licorice qualities. They're very, very pungent and aromatic, which makes it really, really useful in marinades because you can get a lot of aromatic quality out of it. It's also, in my opinion at least, it's also the predominant flavor that you get from Chinese 5-spice, at least star anise and cinnamon. I'd say those are the 2 big things that I get from Chinese 5-spice. Next up, that's maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper. White pepper has a lot of MSG in it, so if you're looking for where in this recipe does the MSG live, that's probably the big one, is the use of white pepper. Licorice, yeah. Yeah, you can cook with me at dinner time. That's what lots of people have been doing. So over on the YouTube channel, the YouTube live stream, it has a list of all of the ingredients that you need in order to cook the thing that I'm going to be cooking. So what lots of people have started doing is you can go onto the YouTube stream and then pick up those ingredients beforehand, and then do your shopping ahead of time, and then we can cook together. So it's always super fun because we can cook our way through things and then talk about all of the mistakes that we made. I know I made at least one today already. All right, so next up, that's 2 tablespoons of Chinese wine, a cooking wine, which is Shaoxing wine. It is very similar to the flavors that you get from dry cooking sherry. So if you can't get your hands on Shaoxing wine, I would say dry cooking sherry, very similar. And then the last thing that I'm going to add is a really, really small amount of cornstarch. And when I say really, I mean really, really small. That's like, might even be too much. Maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, maybe even less than that. And what's going to happen is that cornstarch, it's going to coat our chicken in our marinade. And then it's going to give the chicken a nice coating a protective coating that keeps the chicken from overcooking in our wok fry. So when you're wok frying, the heat of a wok fry is really, really high and really aggressive. So if you're not careful with a lot of things, especially things like chicken, but also eggs, those things can overcook really quickly, and it will turn rubbery because it will cook faster on the outside than it has. It won't have enough time to cook on the inside by the time it finishes cooking. So by the time the inside finishes cooking, the outside will already be rubbery. So what we add in a lot of Chinese cuisine, and this is also true for a lot of Asian cuisine in general, pretty much anything that comes together in a wok, is we add a tiny little bit of cornstarch to the marinade, or even if you're not marinating, even just add it to the chicken and let it coat. And that gives us a little bit of extra time in the wok, and it kind of prevents it from overcooking. So I do a very similar thing when I wok fry eggs too, or pretty much any kind of protein really. Tim, oh, you sent me an email. Cool, yeah, totally. Brent is stoked about those mics. He really needs some mics. That guy really needs some mics. Thanks, Tim. You're cooking some homemade mac and cheese. Ooh. My favorite thing, well, there's so many different things that you can do with a mac and cheese. Honestly, my favorite thing to do in a mac and cheese is hot dogs and crushed potato chips, which I think is like there's a place here in Oakland called Homeroom. They have a version of that they call the trailer mac, I think, something like that, which is basically crushed potato chips with hot dogs, which is super good. And really nostalgic because I used to eat that when I was a kid a lot. I also love a good chorizo, or maybe a white cheddar. They're really good. There's so many different things that you can do with a mac and cheese. Cool. All right. Next up, I'm going to do a little bit of work on our chow fun today because I did not have a chance to buy fresh chow fun. So what you are looking at is frozen chow fun. I am not positive that these are going to rehydrate properly. We will find out. I have never tried to use frozen chow fun before. Hypothetically, it should work just fine, but we'll find out. This is just shy of 1 pound of chow fun. And what I'm going to do is run it under some cold water really quickly. We don't want to do anything too aggressive because if we're too aggressive with how we treat these, they will start overcooking really quickly because they'll start cooking, which is never a good thing. So really what I'm just going to do right now is rinse off some of the ice in these chow fun noodles. And that's about it. These chow fun noodles, they're already cooked, so we don't need to do too much. They are also a little bit rigid and a little bit stale, so I'm a little worried. We'll find out. I have never tried doing this with chow fun though, so we'll find out. Don't hold me accountable if it doesn't work. Alright. So I believe that is it for prep. So I think we're ready to start cooking. You're doing Asian-inspired meatballs tonight. Cool. Dr. Worm, yeah, we actually did a Chinese Shanghainese lion's head meatball pretty recently. So if you haven't checked that one out, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite dishes of all time. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. Yeah, I highly recommend checking that one out. It's one of my favorite dishes of all time. I have been eating a lion's head meatball since I was a kid. And what is essentially is a meatball that is braised in dark soy sauce. And it's like super savory, also really crispy because of the way that the lion's head meatball comes together. So one of my favorite things of all time to eat. All right. Close. We're upside down again. There it is. All right, so over on the stove, I have my wok that is preheating right now. Let's just flip over again. Stupid GoPro. There we go. All right, so over on the stove, my wok is preheating right now. We want this thing ripping hot before we start cooking on it. That's going to be true anytime that you cook on a wok. Because if it's not hot, then you start moving your way to a mushy stir fry. So anytime that you're wok cooking, the biggest enemy of wok cooking is low temperature. So if you notice that your wok is losing heat rapidly, that's a real bad sign, and we want to make sure that we avoid those low temperatures. Otherwise, you get into that territory. If you've ever had stir fries that are kind of mushy, a little bit porridgey, kind of look like oatmeal or like used like old cereal, those are the qualities that come up when you have a stir fry that is done at low or medium heat. So that happens a lot, especially when people are trying to cook on woks on a home range and they overload the wok. If you put too many things in a wok, it causes that wok stir fry to become like really mushy and a little bit like porridgey. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, we want that wok ripping hot before we start cooking in it. And then we're going to do a couple of things in wok cooking that we do a lot in home wok cooking, mainly batch cooking, which is essentially the process of cooking some elements and then pulling it out and then cooking our next element. And essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that at no point in time does our wok have too many things in it. Because if the wok has too many things in it, then it's going to start dropping in temperature. So by making sure that at no point in time does the wok have more than a couple of things going on in it, we can make sure that the wok stays as hot as we can possibly get it. Do I take down all the smoke detectors? Yeah, I turn off my smoke detectors before I start cooking, because it does get pretty smoky. You'll notice that my wok is starting to smoke quite a bit, so all of that smoke, it starts bellowing into the apartment, and then if you don't turn off those smoke detectors, they will absolutely go off. But yeah, it's a good question. I absolutely turn that stuff off first. Also, I open all the windows, and I have an air purifier that helps quite a bit too. All right, this is looking good. I'm gonna let that go for a little bit longer so we have. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, today we're doing a pad see ew, which is essentially a Thai noodle dish that relies very, very heavily on the use of dark soy sauce. It's sort of like one of the iconic or quintessential noodle dishes that come up a lot in a lot of Thai takeout, at least here in America, I'd probably say, comes up like maybe second to pad Thai is pad see ew, or sometimes drunken noodle. If you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know don't know everything about pad see ew, but I know lots of stuff. So hopefully I can be helpful, and hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least entertaining to watch. If you're looking for the recipe video that goes along with everything that I cook, this version of pad see ew, in addition to pretty much everything that I cook on stream, it has a recipe video that goes along with it. Those all live over on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/woocancook. Lots of fun content over there, including the recipe video for this particular pad see ew. That recipe video is part of a larger series that I've been doing, which is essentially deconstructing or hacking a lot of the foods that come from a local Bay Area restaurants. This particular pad see ew, it comes from a restaurant in Oakland called Nicha Thai. I used to live across the street from there, so I used to order their pad see ew a lot. What stands out most to me in their pad see ew is that they use regular broccoli instead of gailan or Chinese broccoli, which makes it pretty Americanized, or at least that one element makes it pretty Americanized. I think everything else about it is pretty traditional, except for that one element. And the reason that I love that is because I really don't like gailan. So I love that it uses regular old broccoli, so I don't have to eat gailan. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel and checking out what's going on over there. We have a couple of different series that are going on. Probably the most popular one is the Chinese American Hack series, in which we basically deconstruct a lot of classic Chinese American dishes, things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, Beijing beef, a lot of things from Panda Express, what I've been doing lately, and kind of looking at what those dishes look like if they weren't so American. So if we pull out all of those American qualities and then reconstruct them without those American qualities, what do those dishes look like? So kind of reimagining what would like General Tso's chicken look like if it wasn't American. So stuff like that all live over on the YouTube channel. Those recipes in particular are super fun to do because it's really interesting to look at what Chinese American food is without the American, because most of those really classic Chinese American dishes, they're not really Chinese anymore. They're pretty much just American food. So very interesting. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel, checking out what's going on over there. If you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the YouTube channel that you're already on. You made it. Good job. All right. So our wok is ripping hot. I'm gonna let it go for another minute, or maybe another 5-10 seconds, because I just turned the heat up a little bit more, and then we should be good to go. What kind of stove are you using? Yeah, so I'm using a gas range today. I have worked on induction tops and electric tops too. You can totally wok cook on those things. You just have to navigate the heat retention a little bit differently because they have a lot of auto shut-off qualities. Yeah, instant ramen, yeah, totally. All right, so once our wok is nice and hot, then we're adding our cooking oil. So this is, I'm gonna go for about 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil here. Looks like my vegetable oil has a little bit of water in it. That should generally not happen when you add vegetable oil. I was using a little bit of leftover vegetable oil, which probably means that there was some water in it. It's okay, that's not the end of the world. And then what we're doing is a process in Chinese cooking that we call a long yao, which is essentially coating our hot wok in oil with cold oil. And that creates our nice non-stick surface. So we want to make sure that we don't add cold oil to a cold wok and then try and heat it up, because then you'll end up with a really, really sticky surface. Never good. And then I'm starting off with my aromatics. So this is my garlic going in first, followed by my ginger. And then we're going to let that go just long enough until it becomes fragrant. So you want to use your nose at this point. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, that's when you know you're ready to move on. Usually for me, that's about 10 to 15 seconds. Once our garlic and ginger are nice and fragrant, we can add our chicken to the wok. And then what I'm going to do is, so you notice that my chicken, it has quite a bit of liquid in it from the marinade. So what I want to do is hold back as much of that liquid as we can. And that's going to be a part of the effort that we're working towards to make sure that we don't have excess moisture in the wok. So the more moisture that you have in the wok, the more trouble you're going to have keeping that temperature up. So by making sure that we don't add extra liquid to the wok, so here's the remaining liquid in my marinade, we're holding that back, and we can make sure that we have as much heat retention as we can possibly get. And you'll notice that the cornstarch that we added to the marinade, it's slowing down that cooking process a little bit, just enough in order to get the inside or interior of our chicken to cook through. It doesn't do a lot, but it does enough to slow down that cooking process so that we don't overcook here. Skipping a little. All right. Once we have a nice, we're looking for about 80% cooked through. This doesn't need to be completely cooked through. We do need it to be mostly cooked through though. And then we can go ahead and remove it. All right, so I'm pulling my chicken out of the wok, and then I'm giving my wok a rinse down, and then we're gonna do everything all over again. So the biggest challenge, or like letdown, I guess, of batch cooking is what we essentially just rinsed out of our wok was a whole bunch of flavors. So that's all like all of the fat, a lot of fat from our chicken, a lot of like garlic, a lot of that allicin, a lot of, in Italian cooking, you refer to that as fond. All of those things, there are lots of flavor going on in there. So when you're batch cooking, you have to rinse that out because if you leave it behind, it will start burning, and then you end up with burnt stuff in your wok cooks. So it's never good because all of that stuff is going to start charring, and then you get a lot of char in your wok. It's one of the big trade-offs between batch cooking and wok cooking. But I have to say, it is very, very important to make sure that you rinse that wok out thoroughly. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of crap, junk in your wok. Yeah, oh, your shallots are oblong ones and round ones. Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're really annoying to peel and chop. Even sometimes when sometimes I've peeled open shallots and they have a skin on the inside too because of the way that they grow. So they're kind of annoying, but I think they're worth it. I think that if you have the time and foresight to buy a shallot ahead of time, I think it makes a huge difference. Yeah, I think the one that I have is actually a brown one, but the one that I usually prefer getting is a purple one. But I don't think I could find one. I think there was a reason why I didn't find them. What's going on over here? Yes, specific funny, great username. Today we're doing a pad see ew. If you're tuning in just now, we're doing a pad see ew, which is a Thai noodle dish that's super, super popular in a lot of Thai cooking. Right now we're working on our batch cooking technique. So I just removed all of our chicken from the wok, which looks like this. This is our, I guess we can use this camera. I just removed our chicken from the wok, so here is our finished chicken. It looks like this. So we flash cooked our chicken on our first fry, then we removed it, and right now we're getting ready to do our second cook, which will be our veggies, noodles, and then we're going to add the chicken back to the wok and finish up our stir fry. So that's going to be a big element in how we avoid mushy stir fries is batch cooking like this. Good question though. If you're looking for the recipe videos for this, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel. Lots of folks already watching the YouTube live stream over there too. Lots of people have been tuning in over there because that's where the schedule of all of the live streams lives. So if you were watching over on YouTube, you would have known a couple of weeks ago that I would be doing this. I'm pretty sure someone requested this one. That's why I scheduled this, because someone asked me to do it. So if you want to know what I'm going to be cooking next, I recommend hopping over to YouTube. We also have fancier cameras going on over there, so I've been told that the YouTube live stream is easier to watch on desktop and it's like clearer. So if you can see it, yeah, you can totally see it. So this fancy camera, that's the YouTube stream. This iPhone, that's the Reddit stream. Oh, how is your smoke alarm? So I unplugged the smoke alarm. That's really, really important when you're wok cooking, is make sure you unplug that smoke alarm, or else it's absolutely going to go off, because my house is totally filled with smoke right now. What kind of noodles are these? These are chow fun noodles. So today we are working with frozen fresh chow fun noodles, which I have never done before, so we will find out if it will work. Usually what I like doing is using fresh chow fun noodles, obviously, but I didn't have a chance to go to the store today, so we're working off of the frozen ones that were in the fridge. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, flat rice noodles, totally. 2 woks, yeah, you could totally use 2 woks if you have if you have 2 woks. That would be a lot of cookware to store, though. This 1 wok is already a pain in the ass to store for me. All right, so our wok is ripping hot again. I'm gonna add some vegetable oil to the wok again. We want to be careful about adding too much oil here, because you want to remember that there is quite a bit of rendered chicken fat in your chicken already. So once we add that back to the wok, you're going to have quite a bit of fat and oil to contend with. Dogecoin, yeah. I'm gonna let that go. That's not quite hot enough, so I'm gonna let it go for a little bit longer. I will also say, if you're watching on Reddit, we're also working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun stuff going on, including fancier cameras and all of the recipes, and the concurrent live stream. All right. So our wok is ripping hot again. I'm going to start with our Thai chilies. Thai chilies, especially if you leave those seeds in, will absolutely release a lot of capsaicin as soon as it goes into the wok. So I'm actually going to even open my windows more here, because they're going to release quite a bit of caustic smoke. So if you hear me coughing in the next minute, that's probably because of these Thai chilies. And I'm just going to bloom that just long enough until it becomes slightly fragrant. And then I'm following it up immediately with my broccoli. And then we're going to give this a flash cook for just long enough in order to cook off some of that rawness. So we don't need our broccoli to be fully cooked through all of the way. We just want it to we just want to try and cook off some of the rawness of our broccoli. So that's kind of the quality of flash cooked veggies that you will often associate with wok cooking. Is sort of like, almost like half cooked veggies is wok cooking. And that comes from flash cooking veggies on extremely high heat for an extremely short period of time. All right. Next up, I'm adding my chicken back to the wok. And we're going to give that one more toss. followed by my chow fun. Fingers crossed that frozen chow fun works. We'll find out. And then you will notice, so I can turn off the overheads and you can listen even, that as soon as we added all of those ingredients to our wok, you'll notice that there's not any sizzling going on anymore. So if you're still cooking stuff and you notice that happen, that's a sign that you just lost all of the heat in your wok. So this, in our case, it's okay because we're not really cooking anything anymore. We're really just combining. But if I was still trying to cook my chicken or my broccoli, either of those things, they both need to be cooked on extremely high heat. So if I had heard this while either of those elements were cooking, that's a real bad sign. And those Thai chilies, they're getting to me. Do I cook with peanut oil? Yeah, I do. Today I'm actually using vegetable oil, grapeseed oil actually, because I ran out of peanut oil mainly. But either vegetable oil, canola oil, even grapeseed oil, peanut oil, all of them have high smoke points, which, not your wife, it's a great username. The high smoke point is what prevents the oil from burning. So if we were using something like olive oil, it would absolutely have started burning. But since we're using high smoke point olive oil, like peanut oil or vegetable oil, it won't burn. It's a really awesome username. Yeah, it will be chow no fun, exactly. Yeah, so to that point though, I love using peanut oil when I have it. It works really great in wok fries. It's probably like the most traditional thing to use in a wok fry. But I will also say is that if you're going to keep one type of oil in your house, peanut oil is not super neutral, which makes it not a great thing to use anytime you're not wok frying. So if you're like, say, making hash browns, or if you're, I don't know, making Italian food. Actually, Italian food you should be using olive oil. It's generally not a good oil to use for all purpose because it's not neutral. So usually when I have peanut oil, I will also have vegetable oil on the side. So what I like saying is that if you're going to have one kind of oil in the house, I would say make it vegetable oil. If you're going to have two, olive oil probably be the second thing that you should have in the house. And if you're going to have three, you should have peanut oil, which is great for wok frying. Anabolic steroids. I did not know that. That's really interesting. I believe what I'm using is organic grapeseed oil. I'm pretty sure it's organic. Alright, so I just added my sauce to our mix, and things are looking real nice. And then what we're finally going to do is add our eggs. So you'll notice that we're adding these really, really late. And that's because we want to coat everything in those eggs. So if we had added them any earlier, we would have ended up with curds of egg. And then we would have sort of like the look that you would associate with fried rice, which is essentially rice with egg curds dispersed throughout. In a pad see ew or really any kind of Thai noodle, that's not what we want. What we want are noodles that are coated in egg. And that's how you get the quality of egg noodle that you associate with Thai food. And it looks like these frozen noodles are working out okay. They seem to be coming together. Cool. Alright, so I'm just letting these eggs set a little bit more thoroughly. They don't have to be fully set because they will also carry over cook quite a bit. But we do want to use some of this wok heat to make sure that we cook off some of that moisture. And the last thing that we want to do is always season to taste. So you'll notice that I did not add any salt until the very, very end. I love doing that in wok fries, just hold off on that salt until the very end. Because I've frequently found that salt also very frequently gets in the way of the flavor profile of umami. So if you're working towards building layers of umami like we have been doing, very often the use of salt will start contradicting umami, and it gets a little bit distracting. Right. Oops. Yeah. So we're removing everything from the wok, and the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're wok frying, I start saying this at pretty much the end of every cook, is we want to clean out our wok. So super important is that while your wok is hot, the wok is also still non-stick, so that hot surface of the wok is keeping things from sticking to it. Once it cools down, you're going to have a pretty sticky surface, so really save yourself some trouble and clean that wok while it's still hot. So what I just did is I just gave it a little bit of a rinse in the sink. And there's a little bit of stuff still stuck on, so I'm just using my cooking utensil to scrape some of that egg off. And then I'm going to rinse it one more time. And that's it. Pretty much everything just comes right off. How to do it. If we had let the wok cool down and then tried to clean it, you would have noticed that all of the stuff that leaves behind that we were able to just rinse off just now would have set, and then you would have had a lot of trouble getting that stuff off. And that's when you start getting into the world that you don't want to be in with wok cooking, which is like doing stuff like scrubbing and like breaking out sponges, steel wool, all of the things that you don't want to be doing in a wok cook or in your carbon steel woks, because when you start breaking those things out, that's how you end up with scraping off your seasoning, which is the most important part about a wok. Is it seasoned with this? And then just lastly, what I'm going to do, so we're on a little bit of heat right now. Our wok isn't that hot, but it is hot enough that we can add a little bit of oil, and then we're coating everything with a very thin layer of oil. And that's just enough to keep the carbon steel of our wok from starting to oxidize. And that's it. So proper wok care. Always clean those woks while it's still hot, immediately after you finish cooking. And when I say immediately, I mean like it should be the first thing that you do after you remove stuff from the wok. Otherwise, stuff will stick, and then you're going to have a bad time. Oyster sauce might be, oh yeah, oyster sauce and black vinegar. Yeah, black vinegar is a little bit tough to find. I saw it had a different name when I went to the grocery store recently. I know that like I've only ever seen black vinegar in Chinese grocery stores though, so that might be tough to find. But oyster sauce, I think you can find that, at least here in California, you can find that stuff at like Safeway or like Vons. Joseph, yeah, I'm glad to see you popping over to Reddit. That's cool. Thanks for popping over. All right. Yeah, fish sauce and oyster sauce, they go really well together. They're very similar in quality of like umami. So I would say is that usually most of the time when I use either of those ingredients, I probably only use one of the two because otherwise it kind of gets overwhelming. But I actually think that in Thai noodle dishes like pad see ew, it's actually a really, really important flavor is that fishiness, like that fishy umami quality. So I actually like adding both, and I think that the addition of oyster sauce in addition to fish sauce, it gives us like that nice dark quality to it that we're looking for. All right, so that's this. Well, I always forget to taste these, so people keep asking me to taste this stuff. Oh yeah, frozen chow fun, it totally works. I took a gamble today, but it worked. I'm glad it paid off. I'm gonna start freezing my chow fun all the time now. Also, it's like super rich, like those Thai chilies that are really present. So I'm getting a lot of heat from those Thai chilies. Our broccoli and our chicken is nice and crisp and still very tender because of the flash cook. Nothing is overcooked and nothing is undercooked. I think we've sufficiently avoided the danger of mushy stir fries by using our batch cooking technique. We can even zoom in on Reddit, on YouTube. Fun new zoom lenses. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, lots of umami and really interesting flavor profiles that I love about this dish. This is easily one of my favorite Thai noodle dishes of all time. So hopefully you guys try it. Thank you everyone for tuning in. You still can't use chopsticks, yeah. That's like one tip that I love like exposing about like Chinese cooking, is that chopsticks, at least for me, and I've been using chopsticks since I was like 4, is that they're really difficult to use if you're not using a rice bowl. So I think this is actually only true for Chinese food, but in most Chinese cuisine, what you usually do is, so if this was my rice bowl, what we do is we eat it with our hands. So you pick it up, and lots of times you will see Chinese people using chopsticks and then shoveling food into their mouth this way. So the reason that works is because you can pick it up and then use the chopsticks to kind of move stuff from the bowl straight into your mouth. Which means that you're not actually picking a lot of stuff up with the chopsticks, you're mostly just moving stuff around. That does not work if you're on a flat plate. So lots of times when I go to Chinese restaurants with my non-Asian friends, lots of times I'll see them, they'll pick food off of like the family style plates and then they'll put it on a flat plate and then try eating it with some chopsticks, which is really hard to do, including like a bowl like this. This is actually going to be really difficult to eat with chopsticks because it's a flat surface, which means I can't actually pick it up unless I pick this whole bowl up and shovel it in my mouth. It's going to be really hard to use. So super often, most of the time when I finish stuff, I'll put chopsticks here because it looks really pretty, but oftentimes I'll just eat it with forks because it's easier to do. So, also, these chopsticks are really pretty. So. Yeah. What kind of noodles? Yeah, so these are fresh chow fun noodles. Today we're using frozen fresh chow fun noodles that came out of my freezer. Which I wasn't sure that it would work because I have never tried to defrost fresh chow fun from the freezer, but it totally worked. They're totally tender. We just rinsed off some of the freezer burn. I think there was a little bit of freezer burn because I didn't package it correctly, but otherwise I think it totally came together just fine. So I was a little concerned, but I think it worked. Would I recommend wooden bowls? Yeah, I love using these wooden bowls. I don't really have a reason why. I just like the shape. They're like large and flat, so we can like, they're good for serving and like pouring like large amounts of stuff out of a wok into a big flat bowl because they're really good for serving. So I think it's more about the shape of the bowl rather than the fact that it's made of wood. But also, like, I think the main reason that I like them is because they're the ones that my mom used to have. You can find them in a lot of Chinatown places, a lot of Chinatown like restaurant supply stores. You'll see those bowls pop up because I think they're really popular in Chinese food. You're gonna subscribe? Yeah, totally. Thank you all for subscribing. If you haven't yet, definitely hop over to YouTube and check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month. I know a couple of folks have already popped over and subscribed. So if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over and check out what's going on. Only subscribe if you're interested. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. People do that a lot, and I don't know why they do that. Because you know, why are you doing that? I don't like spamming people. So if you're not interested, don't subscribe. It's weird. But lots of fun, interesting content going on over there, including the recipe videos for everything that I cook on stream. So if you'll notice, autofocus. So pretty much everything that I cook on stream, it has a recipe video that goes along with it. In those recipe videos, I usually do a little bit more to kind of talk my way through some of the decision making that goes behind the things that I'm cooking. And like why I add certain things, why I don't add some things, why I leave some stuff out, stuff like that. It all lives over on the YouTube videos. This particular pad see ew, it came from a recipe that I did hacking a version of pad see ew that comes from a restaurant here in Oakland called Nicha Thai. That was part of a larger restaurant series that I've been doing, hacking foods from restaurants here in the local San Francisco Bay Area. That one comes from Oakland. We've done stuff from a couple places in town. We did a soup from Shandong in Oakland. We did a Dragon House. Actually, that was also soup. Also, the Lion's Head meatballs that came from Dragon House. Lots of fun stuff. If you happen to live in the Bay Area, that series is super fun because basically what we're doing is reproducing a lot of takeout that you've probably eaten at some point. In addition to that, there's a number of different series. There's a whole series that's dedicated to reproducing foods from TV and film. So I've done a few things from the Legend of Korra series, which has been super fun. Then we've done a lot of things that come from Chinese American classics, so I've definitely hacked a number of Panda Express and P.F. Chang's recipes, which you probably have seen come up over on the channel if you're subscribed already. Those are really fun because what we're essentially doing is breaking down a lot of Chinese American food and then removing those American qualities and replacing them with Chinese qualities and kind of seeing what that looks like, which is always really interesting because a lot of those things are not really Chinese at all anymore. They're pretty much just American food. And it looks really interesting if you remove all of the American qualities because you're not really left with much after that. You're pretty much just left with fried chicken a lot of times. So that's always really interesting. Do I ever cook vegan? Yeah, I do. I probably cook vegetarian more than I cook vegan. But I've started exploring a little bit on veganism with Chinese cooking. Vegan is really, really hard in Chinese cooking, or really just like Asian cooking in general, because there are so many different things that are derived from meat. So it's super, super easy to make Chinese food vegan or vegetarian because basically all you have to do is remove the meat, and lots of times some of those recipes they even have protein involved already, which is why tofu is so common in Chinese food. But making it vegan is really, really difficult because then you have to find substitutes for things like today we use oyster sauce, fish sauce. Both of those are derived from fish. Even a lot of Indian food that I've explored is really tricky because they contain a lot of yogurt, which is interesting and difficult. Today we used eggs. That's also really tricky. So vegan is really tough. Vegetarian I've gotten pretty good at, but vegan is pretty tough because there's so many things that are derived from animal product. P.F. Chang's has been domesticated. Yeah, totally. So that's what makes that series so interesting is the things that we're deconstructing. They're not really Chinese food. They're pretty much just American food. So when you deconstruct a Chinese American classic, so the one that's coming out, actually that's coming out this Friday, is we're doing the crispy Mongolian beef from P.F. Chang's. And when you deconstruct that, essentially what you get when you look at the P.F. Chang's Mongolian beef is a very, very Americanized version of P.F. Chang's or of Mongolian beef. Which is super interesting if you compare it to a more traditional approach to Mongolian beef, and look at them side by side and kind of take a look at what are the qualities that we removed in order to make them work. Do I make Korean food? Yeah, so I do a bit of Korean food. We did there's a number of actually Korean recipes, and some Korean derived recipes. Probably my favorite Korean one was probably the japchae that we did. I haven't done a japchae on the live stream lately because I can't find glass noodles right now. But the japchae one's super fun. We also did a kimchi jeon, which is a kimchi pancake, which looks really similar to a Taiwanese scallion pancake. So that was super interesting to kind of look at the way that Korean food approaches pancakes. We also did a kimchi fried rice, which was super interesting because that's not really Korean anymore. It's pretty much just Chinese with kimchi and gochujang. So that's always super fun. Cool. Yeah, cool. I think I answered everyone. If I missed your question, feel free to repeat yourself in the chat. I'll be here cleaning up stuff, so if you have any more questions, feel free to repeat yourself. I'll also be spinning some music too. So we recently broke 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. We've been celebrating that with a new remix and track that's, I think it should have been playing under my voiceover this whole time. So that track that you've been listening to, we have a new one up. That all lives. That reminds me, all of the music that you're listening to, it all lives over on Woo Cook's Beats, which is the sister channel. All of those are beats that I produced up until in March of last year. I used to play music professionally. I started Since then, I started a new solo channel, basically just producing solo beats and doing a lot of remixes. So lots of fun content over there. So if you're looking for all of the music that we've been listening to, hop over to that channel and check out what's going on over there. Yeah, what else can I say? Oh yeah. So lastly, I'll say is we're working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. We got a bunch of fun new content coming up soon. So every Friday we have new recipe videos. The next one coming up this Friday is for a Mongolian beef from PF Chang's. That's super interesting because I actually didn't know this, but there is a very specific way to that Mongolian beef is fried, and that's because it is a little bit crispy because it's coated in cornstarch. So that video is going to explore some of those, some of the tricks to making Mongolian beef. In addition to all of the recipe videos, there's also live streams that are happening every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, and those new recipe videos out every Friday. If you're watching on Reddit, that's also where the schedule of all of the live streams lives. So there's a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking. I think it goes out almost a whole month now. So if you want to find out what's coming up next, definitely hop over there and check out what's going on. Lots of fun new content popping up, including all of the live streams and recipe videos. So holy crap, there's 8 hours of airtime. I don't know what to do with 8 hours of airtime, but thank you all for the airtime. That's really cool. Oh, the turning on, that must have been what's doing it. Old Samwon, thank you so much. That's really cool. Oh, Zorja Rishi. Any unique recipes that aren't just rice? Zorja Rishi is really fancy. Before I make any recommendations, I will tell you is that Zorja Rishi's, they make that. So a Zorja Rishi is like the Cadillac of rice makers. It makes like the fluffiest rice that I have ever eaten, but it also takes a crazy long time to cook rice. So like, I think it takes like over an hour for those things to cook. So like, I also own a Zorja Rishi, and it's the one that I use most of the time. But I only use it if I remember to make rice ahead of time. So if you've ever like forgotten to make rice and started to make the rice during the time that you're cooking, that doesn't work with a Zorja Rishi because it takes like 45 minutes. So sometimes I think it takes over close to an hour sometimes for me. So if you're using the Zorja Rishi, I would say also keep an old rice cooker on hand too to make sure that you have a way of cooking rice quickly in case you forget. So, but yeah, unique recipes that use aren't just rice. You can do a pretty good sushi rice with the Zorja Rishi, which so the one that the reason that I was exploring that is because I was working on making a spam musubi, which is it's a Hawaiian sushi dish that uses spam. So you could do a good sushi rice. I think that would be super fun. Other things though that like prominently feature rice. Yeah, I don't know. I think those are the big ones for me. It's probably sushi rice. That's what I would explore. After that, I pretty much just use my rice Zorja Rishi for like any real all-purpose rice cooking. Cool. You dated a chick that was vegan. Yeah, totally. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. We'll be back tomorrow doing something that I can't remember. We'll be cooking something. If someone's on YouTube, they can tell me. Check out what's going on, what's scheduled, and tell me what I'm supposed to be cooking tomorrow. I actually forget. I know that later this week we're doing the Beijing beef from Panda Express, and there's definitely some fried rice too. So I think that's Wednesday and Thursday. I forget what's happening tomorrow though. So if someone wants to help me, they can tell me. Am I gonna eat that? Yeah, lots of people keep asking me to do the mukbang. Yeah, super, super tasty. I love this dish. It's one of my favorite noodle dishes. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Hop over to YouTube. Check out what's going on over there if you haven't yet. Lots of fun stuff popping up. Better cameras. It's clearer. I've been told that it looks better and it's easier to watch on desktop. So if you're watching on Reddit on a mobile phone, I know that the Reddit stream can be tricky to watch on YouTube or on desktop. So check out what's going on over there and give it a subscribe. Only if you're interested. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. I don't know why people do that. Don't subscribe if you're not interested because then I'm going to spam you and that's annoying. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon. Stick around. I'm going to be spinning some tunes and doing some dishes. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me some questions. Bye.
Girl, you know I want your love. Your love me.